All right, so today we turn to what makes us think the way we think about politics, and we're going to be looking at several different sources that have varying amounts of influence on us as we progress through our life, and we're going to have a close look at those with the idea in mind that we're going to become sophisticated observers of what's being fed us, and so that we have a look at what are the conservative and what are the liberal sort of influences, where they're coming from, how much influence they're exerting on us, and to what degree each source may or may not be biased. We'll say this in advance and several times probably. Bias is not bad. Bias is argument. And most of the influences we have are biased. They're arguing something, they have an agenda. And there's nothing wrong with that. We do want to make sure that we know that the ones that try and tell us they're not biased are exposed, and certainly the ones that tell us they're not very biased are exposed, and that we make sure we're aware of that. Now, the sources of political thought that we have, without question, well, there's 4 of them. The 2 early ones that we have, I mean, it's not even questionable, is your family. And that family connection stays with you for the rest of your life. Especially the way you are right now. I know many of you are not the same ideology as your parents, but many of you are. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at your age, you're reflective of their morals and values. And so what do we mean by family? And it runs very, very deep. You'll have it for the rest of your life. It's the most important of all the political sources of the way you're going to think politically. And it's not because you sit around talking about macroeconomic, supply-side economics as it relates to the sequestered budget with your parents at night, nor did you probably do so when you were young. Talk about different sort of political specific developments. I mean, you might have known who was running for president, who your parents wanted, and that sort of stuff, but that was about it. So what are we talking about? How could they have that much influence on you if you're not sitting around talking specific politics? And it's because the basic ethics that develop with them are what our core political values are all about. And that stuff starts young. I think that Sigmund Freud got many things wrong. One being the fact that we're all gay, and now it's just a matter of it coming out or not. I think he got that one probably wrong. What he did get right, though, and for the most part, by the time you're 4 or 5 years old, you're basically sort of molded by your parents. Your basic core being is done. And you could spend a lot of time and a lot of money in therapy and other sorts of encounter sessions, or reading this book or that book, or turning to this religion or that religion. And the fact of the matter is, most of your core is done by the time you're 4, 5, 6 years old. And that's exactly what we're trying to make here. Is political thought is that basic to the core. It's as basic as crossing the street without looking both ways, not touching hot stoves, going to the bathroom the right way, depending on whether or not you think people are like this, or if you think people are like that, and how you treat people, and how you that is the very basics of what human beings are all about. And political thought stems from those very, very same exact things. So, what do we mean absorbing your parents? Well, has this happened to you before? You pulled up to a stop sign, and you've got the guy there that's always there, will work for food. And if you can imagine, you're 5 years old, say, and you're in the back of your father's Mercedes-Benz on the way to your little soccer game or something like that, and you pull up to Ferguson and LBJ, and here is this guy right here, Nick, or whatever we want to call him. He's always up there at Ferguson and LBJ. And can you see where there might be a reaction where a father looks over at him, and you're sitting in the back seat in your little high seat, and you look over and you say, "Hey, Daddy, look at that poor guy. He looks like he's hungry, and maybe he's got something wrong with his teeth." And your dad looks over at you and says, "Yeah, you're right." And he lowers the window down on Mercedes-Benz and calls the guy over and says, "Hey, you, go get a job." Maybe even peppering it with some sort of language, and he pulls up the window in the Mercedes-Benz so the cold, cold air becomes re-engulfed in you, and looks back at you and says, "See, Tommy, or Timmy, or Janie, you work for a living. You don't do that." He just wants a handout as you stare with your mouth open. Next week, you're going to the same soccer game with your mom, though, this time, perhaps, or your grandmother, or your aunt, in the back of their little minivan. Same guy's there. Why? Because he's always there, isn't he? We'll work for food. You look up at him. You say to your mommy, "Oh, Mommy, look, there's that guy. Daddy said he needs to do things on his own and work, but he still looks like he's hungry and he's got something wrong with his teeth." To which your mom says, "Oh, yes," and she lowers the window in the minivan and calls him over and said, "Here you are, sir. God bless you. Hope things will be better for you," and gives him $20. Looks back at little Tommy or Timmy and says, "You know what? Sometimes people are just on the down and outs and need some help." Those are the way that we get our core values formed early on, and they stay with us. Second, school. I know you guys don't sit around also as well doing at lunch talking about macroeconomics as well. So what are we talking about? Well, first of all, teachers, of course, of all kinds. Conservative teachers, liberal teachers, and the like. Your friends. But you know what? For the most part, this is tweaking only at this stage of your life. Not only what Dr. Morris really and I have to say, for the most part, is going to change you, and that is for sure. From a liberal to conservative, or conservative to a liberal, ain't going to happen. Why? Because that stuff's formed early. Tweaking can happen. Focusing on issues, certainly getting you interested and empowered, are the role of teachers and friends. But we tweak only. Opinion leaders. Now, who are we talking about? We're not talking about this guy here, Sheen, who I guess we've all heard of, but he's not just some guy off the street. We're talking about somebody who has some expertise in which you may disagree with or agree with. Disagree with is fine, but somebody that you think knows what they're talking about, right? So it could be Charlie Sheen, if for some reason you were to think he knows what he's talking about when it comes to politics, but not necessarily. I gave you a good example here. Why do we have to listen to this guy if you're watching the NBA playoffs right now? I don't really like Charles Barkley much at all. And I don't like. I tried to not pay attention to him at all. Thank goodness he doesn't do a lot of play-by-play anymore. And so when it comes to the analysis shows, I turned him off very rapidly. But why do we pay attention to this guy? Because he was Charles the Great when he was in the NBA. Unbelievable rebounder, scorer, hustler, tough guy. And because of that, we pay attention to him. We grant him a certain amount of expertise. After that, you still have to be a good broadcaster, so people like you and return to you. But first and foremost, he's an opinion leader when it comes to the NBA because we trust that he knows at least a little bit about what he's talking about, even if we disagree. So who are we talking about? Teachers, parents, priests, journalists. It could be a bevy of different people that are opinion leaders. Now, I do want to get to some, before we get to the media and a couple other things, some overarching points that we usually do. That, again, political thought, after we get past our parents, are tweaks only. For the most part, political thought will focus our attention but not change our opinions, for the most part. Most of it is fed to us through these sound bites, and it's a little discouraging for a government teacher because you're talking about 30 seconds to 45 seconds to 1 minute of coverage of some rather large stories because they know that the American people don't have the stomach or the attention to watch more. And therefore, if you're a sophisticated producer of sound bites, you can move the topic. and you can get people hooked on the certain things that are said. And you know what, the people that are saying the speeches, let's say Mr. Obama's staff knows what's going to be on the sound bites, knows what's going to be used. They may have a 15-minute speech to the Boy Scouts, but they know which part's going to be, which part of that exactly. They may have 5 of them. They know one of the phrases is going to make it, what he says and how he says it. They know what the media will do and how to wag them and what the media will show us. So here's a good example of a soundbite, and I don't believe I can play this soundbite back and in the presentation here. So if I could get one of you please to hit that hyperlink on the soundbite, I'd appreciate it. And you'll see this is from the Bloomberg network on a very important story, but as you see, it's pretty superficial and very good example of what we normally see. When you finish that, if you would stop and then hit the next advance to the next part of the slide. Thanks. Now, generally, when we get to the media, we're going to see that the media is liberal. Now, how much liberal is another matter. We're going to be looking at a wide variety, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 different ones. Just because we say one tends to be liberal doesn't mean it's as liberal as another, or right is near as liberal as right. Without question, I believe that without question, I believe that that idea that the media is liberal is way overplayed. To call CNN the communist news network like Rush Limbaugh or some of these people do is just ludicrous, right? So, but having that said in mind, I think overall we can say that in fact the media is liberal. How much remains to be seen. And again, the tweaking, the focusing of the attention is more the role of the media, quite honestly, than changing your or our opinions about certain core issues. Now, the national press roles that we have, this is for the national press, the big outlets. First of all, without question, they are the gatekeepers. They're the major issues of the day that nations tend to lend its attention to. They're the people who focus us on things, and we know what kind of things they tend to focus that they like, right? War, disease, pestilence, accidents, death, drugs, disease, war, and on and on and on and on. And they'll chase that. It's a classic quandary. Do they do that because we want that, or do we want that because they give it to us, right? And of course, nothing gets their attention ours quicker than a good old-fashioned some sort of war or some sort of threat to the American way. So, and I'm going to let you see these in just a second, these Daily Show things. But the scorekeeper role, very, very critical when it comes to these early front runners. When it comes to presidential elections, early on they latch on with somebody, usually from the challenging party, and decide this is going to be our guy. And not really sure why guys like Jimmy Carter, the poor peanut planter from Georgia in 1978, became the person, or Howard Dean in 2000, who became the darling, was quickly destroyed soon after, which we'll be getting to. Certainly, we saw this in the last. We paid much attention to the last election with some of the early candidates for the Republican nomination, who became the darlings and then quickly fell away because it's hard to maintain the top spot after you've become the darling. That's very important. So what we're going to do now is have you. I'll sign off in this part of the lecture and have you go ahead and watch these very, very funny daily shows about what they will chase, what the media will chase, and how they'll do it. The first two. Then the second one, the last one, is the other thing that they always chase, and that is the shamed politician who's gotten into trouble. And we've seen it a million times, often having to do with sex or money, where the shamed politician comes on and apologizes, says he'll do better, blah, 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 blah. Usually has his wife there. And, well, here's an interesting way that the Onion saw in which a congressman decided to become more proactive, let's put it that way, about his scandal. So enjoy, and we'll see you at the next part of the lecture.